Patrick Troughton, whose face you saw on the screen just now, and I will be interviewing him shortly. You'll see that on the tables there are nibbles and you'll have drinks. Do feel free to eat plenty and to stock up on drinks when necessary. There will be an interval in a little while after I've interviewed Mark, and Leela and Mike will sing some more songs for us. After the interval, you'll see there's a quiz on your table. Some of it is easy, some of it is quite challenging. You have to be a real Doctor Who nerd to do all of it. So if anybody can, there's a possible 30 points with the bonus points as well. So if anybody can get all 30, there is a prize. And the prize is the audiobook of The Roundheads, written by Mark Gatiss, which is a second Doctor story read by Anneke Wills. So there's even a prize for the quiz. So after the interval, Simeon will go through the answers to that. Simeon put the quiz together. And then I'm just going to be talking for 10 or 15 minutes just to round up this evening. Okay, so that's where we're going. So Mark, would you like to come and join me? And then we can have a conversation.
Hello.
Welcome. Gosh, thank you. It is bright, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you very much for coming down. You come all the way from York today, so we appreciate that very much. So your father was Patrick Troughton, as I've just said, and for those of us who are Doctor Who fans, that's very exciting.
Are you confessing to the fact that you are a Doctor Who fan?
Absolutely, yes. I still think of Patrick Troughton as being my Doctor, although actually I wasn't really old enough for him to be my Doctor. Right. I think my earliest Doctor Who memory is of him regenerating into John Pertwee. Ah, yes. Right. And I would have been about 5 or 6 at that point.
Well, we must be of a similar age, yeah.
So that is quite disturbing.
Yeah, it was.
But anyway,
so for you, how do you think it was for me?
Yeah, we'll come back to that in a little while. Let's go back though before Doctor Who. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your father passed before 1966, before Doctor Who came along.
Gosh, well, given that I was only about 6 or 7, now you really are testing my powers of perception. But what I've sort of picked up as I've got older, yeah, I mean, Dad was a character actor, is the technical term, and so did lots of things like costume dramas on the BBC, mostly BBC, so lots of Dickens adaptations and that sort of thing, so the literary sort of corpus, the sort of stuff you would expect to do if you were a theatrical actor. So, yeah, Dad did, he was the first Robin Hood on telly.
And when was that?
That would have been
50s?
the late 50s, so
right, okay.
Around about the time I was born. Yeah.
Right.
So I don't remember much of that. But I've seen the photos, and yeah, that's quite a landmark, I guess, in his career. Because telly was still very, very young.
Yeah, right.
I mean, we're talking only like sort of 10 years after the end of the Second World War.
So presumably, if you were watching Robin Hood on television, you actually wouldn't have seen anything at all. You just kind of this blur of figures, but you'd have heard his voice.
Yeah, I mean, we had a black and white telly in those days. We didn't get colour till the 70s. I mean, that dates me, doesn't it? The black and white telly was the one where you switched it off and you'd watch the dot sort of disappear. You remember that? And some of the adverts. You look at them now, and they're cringeworthy. They're just so badly done. And I mean, some of you might think that about the Doctor Who's. The sort of the wobbling sets and the impression that there were actually legions of Daleks when in fact there were only like 5. Yeah. And they would just go round and round and round and round and give the impression that there was a whole legion of them. But, so telly was in its early days, its infancy, and I remember 1 or 2 things like that. So the old Curiosity Shop. I was doing an assembly at a girls' school a couple of weeks ago in York, and the classics teacher came up to me afterwards, and you sort of get aware, you get used to this after a while. She pinned me to the wall and she said, "I remember your dad as Quilp." And I thought, oh, sorry, am I supposed to apologise? But Quilp was this really nasty, vicious, dwarf-like figure in the old Curiosity Shop, which was another Dickens that Dad did. Anyway, before that, he was in the theatre.
Right.
So that was where he sort of learnt the trade, as it were.
So, and he started that before the Second World War?
Yes, he did. And one of his big breaks came when he was asked to play with Laurence Olivier,
right,
in Henry the Third. I think it was Henry the Third? Henry the Fifth? Henry the Third. No, Henry the Fifth, yeah. Henry the Fifth? Yes, Henry the Fifth. No, Richard the Third. Shakespeare, cuff.
They all blur in my mind.
And Dad he was playing the part of the assassin who kills the two nephews or whatever in the tower. Yeah. And he also had to sort of understudy for Olivier in case Olivier got a cold and couldn't carry on or whatever. So that was quite a big thing. And it was coming back from that. So that was done in New York.
Right.
Why? I don't know why, but anyway, it was done in America. And coming back from that, I think it was at that time that the boat that Dad was on was torpedoed. It was a Belgian liner.
Right.
And it was torpedoed. And thankfully, Dad was on the other side of the ship to the hull. And the boat went down.
Right.
And he survived, and along with the other passengers, and that was his introduction to the war.
Yeah.
Which was a bit of a baptism of fire.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
How did he join up? Oh, I was torpedoed on a boat,
Yeah. But he went on from that to join the Navy, which,
yes.
if I'd just been torpedoed, I'd have joined the Air Force or the Army, anything except
Catering
Navy.
Corps.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Why on earth would you want to go back to sea after that? Yes, that's a good point. Never thought of that. But yeah, he joined the Navy, and he wasn't stationed in the Channel. He was stationed off the Norfolk coast.
Right.
Perhaps that was why. And he was on MLs, so motor launchers that would fish ditched airmen out of the North Sea.
Yeah.
And also, I think he was involved in sort of reconnaissance, sort of scouting out German E-boat patrol, submarine activity off the coast, which was one of the main sort of shipping coasts. So, and it was only about 15, 20 years ago that somebody from the church in Bedford, where we were, who was from Norwich, was back visiting parents, and then showed me a newspaper article from the Norfolk Herald or something, some local rag, and it was what the Doctor Who's did in the war. And Dad was like, photograph of Dad on the front cover, saying, Patrick Troughton, hero, rescuer. I thought, oh my word, what's this? So I read all about how Dad once was sent out to patrol, and it was, very stormy. It was late at night. They'd been told that an American bomber had been shot down, and there may be some, airmen floundering around in the water. And lo and behold, he found them and rescued them and brought them back.
Fantastic.
So if you're here tonight and you were that airman, just come up to me afterwards and say,
And there's a very tenuous Southampton connection, I think, because I think the commander of the first boat he was on was the son of the second officer on the Titanic.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Which is a very tenuous connection, but we like the Titanic down here. So,
gosh, yeah.
Lieutenant Lightoller.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Dad had the distinction of wearing strange headgear. And this must be genetic, because he's passed this fetish down to me. It's bizarre, isn't it? So he would wear a tea cozy on the ship.
As you do?
As you do, when you're in the Navy,
Why did you wear a tea cozy?
Because it was warm, I mean.
Yeah, but there's holes.
I know, and it looks a bit odd to the men you're supposed to be commanding. So he was commanding officer of the boat, wearing a tea cozy.
Wearing a tea cozy.
He had a bit of a...
And so you also now wear a tea cozy, do you?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, that would be a bridge too far.
Okay.
But I do like hats.
Right.
It's weird. In fact, I've got one here this evening. Shall I show you it?
Yeah.
this is a prop moment. Here we go. Now this, if any of you are into biking like I am, you'll know what that is, or who that is. Who is that? Yeah, and what's he called? He's called the Doctor. There you go.
Very good. He's the wrong kind of doctor.
He's the wrong kind of doctor, yeah.
It's the wrong kind of machine.
Indeed.
Yeah. Wow. So after that, he was one of the pioneers in television. What do you think drove him in his acting career? What was it?
Bills?
Yeah. Okay. Right.
I mean, a lot of it is just.
Yeah.
I mean, no, I think he always wanted to be an actor, which is interesting because that was a break with sort of family traditions, so solicitors,
right,
legal. In fact, his dad had been in Lloyd's shipping. I don't know whether the Belgian liner had been insured by Lloyd's, but anyway. Yeah, so they'd been solicitors, and Dad was the first to sort of break that mold.
Right.
And, insisted he wanted to be an actor. So there was no sort of, I don't think there was any precedent for that. I think Dad was the first to do that. Just passionate about theatre. Though I think when he did make the break into TV, I think he was relieved because when I was a languages teacher for 16 years. When I became a teacher, he said to me, "Oh, acting's very much like teaching. You're giving a matinee performance every day, Correct. And he enjoyed that.
Right.
And I enjoyed teaching for possibly the same reason. I think theatre was just exhausting and very repetitive because you're literally doing the same thing over and over and over again.
But television must have been exhausting in those early days as well, because it was all live.
Yeah, it was. So, but in a sense, you weren't having to sort of then do the same thing the next day and then the next day and the next day, But no less sort of rigorous and no less, nervy making. I mean, live TV, you've got to get it right first time, otherwise, you've blown it.
Live TV, if it's current affairs, is one thing, but live TV when you're performing in that kind of thing, I think
you have to remember all those lines and get the timing right first time. You think it's scary.
Yeah, it's no wonder things went wrong sometimes in Doctor Who. Is it? You hear a Cyberman fall over or whatever, just offset.
Yeah, that's right. But I think that added to the sort of that was normal. I mean, that was the normal thing. That's how it was done, and so people didn't really expect anything different.
Yeah.
But that meant that he was never sitting with us on the sofa on Saturdays at 6 p.m.
Right.
Because he was doing it.
Yeah.
Which meant that we were there watching our dad being chased by monsters. And before going back to the moment when he was asked to do the role, we were so he was doing a film, The Viking Queen, on location in Ireland. So we all flew over there as a family to watch Dad do it and have a holiday at the same time. And that was the first time I'd seen Dad die on the big screen in Dublin.
Yeah.
Which was really upsetting. I mean, I was 5. I mean,
yes.
And to see Dad being speared by, I think by a Viking, because Dad was playing a Roman soldier, and he gets a knife through the chest. And even though he'd taken us to the studios and we'd seen the gore, we'd seen the leather costume with the slit and the rubber sword, and, even when you see it happening, you're sort of saying, this is not real, this is not real, this is not Dad dying. But then to actually see him in a big screen, because it wasn't small screens, it was big screens.
Okay, right.
That was upsetting.
Yeah, and you were 5. Yes, I
was 5.
I can imagine.
Can you imagine taking your kids, watch me die? But after you get sort of hardened to it after a while, you just detach completely. And then when you get taken to the studios, that's like, oh, it's not real, is it? I mean, for every traumatic moment, there's at least 15 people standing around you, with clipboards and cameras and makeup and, cups of tea and...
Yeah, don't spoil the magic too much.
Oh, I completely wrecked it for you now. Yeah, so there you go.
Yeah, you'll start telling us that the Daleks aren't real then.
I have been inside a Dalek.
Oh! Wow.
Do you know,
Were you able to drive it around or just sit in it?
No, I was still small, and it was just too heavy.
Right.
So, I mean, talk about Blue Peter. Here's one I made earlier. I mean, it really was so basic. I mean, it's like cardboard, almost eggshells painted on the outside. Not quite, but very, very basic. So you sit inside this thing on this barely padded seat, and you have, you know, the arms and then the head bit. And then there's a hole in the bottom, and it's on casters. So effectively, you're having to drag yourself around in this wretched, you know, wooden contraption. That's why there are no slopes. I mean, I was only a kid, so it's just really hard work.
Yeah.
Moving, let alone getting upstairs. It's all gone modern now. They fly, don't they? It's ridiculous. So that was fun. I mean, that was great fun.
Yeah.
And then seeing Yetis and Cybermen. And a Yeti on location in Wales, a Yeti with holding his head, drinking a cup of tea. It was a cup, you know, a brief moment of pause. Cup of tea, you know, and there he is, standing there. Huge bloke, you know, I mean, these guys were huge.
Right.
The Ice Warriors, all the actors were big blokes. I mean, you had to be a big bloke. But that was fun, yeah.
How often did you go to the set or the studio?
Quite a lot. I mean, sort of half terms,
right.
Fairly regularly. Yeah, so it was always some gravel pit in Dorset or some windy, freezing, wet slope in Wales, you know, where these things were being filmed. I mean, Tibet, I suppose, looks a little bit like Wales. But yeah, it was always some gravel pit somewhere in, you know, near Lyme Regis or just sort of space, you know, it's like landscape.
Exotic locations.
Exotic locations, yes. No expense spared by the BBC. And so those were sort of fun, but a bit sort of tedious because you just spend an awful lot of time standing around.
Right.
The really fun things were the studios. BBC television studios in White City, before it moved to Manchester, were just, I mean, it's like Aladdin's cave. I mean, you can imagine, 6, 7-year-old boy, would you like to come to the studio? What do you mean, would I like to come to the studio? I mean, it was just magic, absolute magic. So you go up, you enter the reception, and it was like, keep your eyes open, because you're going to see people you recognize. Ooh, there's Val Singleton, Blue Peter. Ooh, there's Raymond Baxter, Tomorrow's World. And then, you know, we go into the hushed, a bit like a monastery, really. The closer you get to the studios, the quieter it becomes, and the darker it becomes. And you go through these sort of, like, vacuum-sealed doors when the green light goes on, green, red, and orange.
Right.
You can go in, and there are signs out, lit signs saying quiet studio or break in rehearsal or something. And you go through these double doors, black curtain, sort of go through the curtain, and it's all dark. And then suddenly you turn a corner and there's the set. And suddenly, whoa, wow, that's a cobbled street. Or, look, you know, it's amazing. And then there's all these lights like this, you know, and all this gear, just tons of cables that you're going to trip over.
Yeah.
And then the monsters, and then actors in costume, and it's just like magic, total magic.
Are there any that particularly stick in your mind, those studio visits?
Getting in the Dalek, that was, I suppose, the big one. Having lunch in the canteen and seeing Dad's Army, having a drink at the bar. in all their, you know, all their gear.
Fantastic.
So, you know, Pikey and Jonesy and the lot, you know.
Brilliant.
Just, oh my word, this Dad's Army, you know. Yeah, those sorts of things were just fantastic. Yeah, really good fun.
Yeah. So your dad became doctor in 1966.
Yep.
Was that an easy decision for him to make?
He didn't make it, funnily enough. He was doing this thing, The Viking Queen, in Ireland. And Maurice Lambert, his agent, rings up and says, I've got various parts. There's this one that you might be interested in. It's that science fiction program for children, Doctor Who, that Billy Hartnell was doing. And Dad said, I'm not interested. And apparently, this may be apocryphal, but this is what Mum swears. She said, oh, don't be stupid, Patrick, it'll pay the school fees. Decision, that's it. Okay, so basically, my mum was responsible for my dad doing Doctor Who.
We are deeply grateful to your mother.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, I can't thank her. Yeah, so that was it. So I think his intention was only ever to sort of do it short term, because the thing he feared most of all was becoming typecast.
Right. And
just becoming a sort of, stuck in a role. He was a character actor. He wanted to be versatile.
Right.
And didn't want to be,
Yeah. Is that why he felt that they needed to be such a sharp distinction between the actor and the role, not just in Doctor Who, but with everything?
He had
because that's the impression I get from
definitely.
Interviews and
this
things.
comes up in interviews that he gives a lot. He hardly ever gave interviews. If you're a journalist here, apologies, but he hated journalists. He called them the distorters, not the reporters, because they couldn't be trusted. They would always twist it. They'd always bias. And so he hated giving interviews. So there are very few on YouTube. There are some. But he's always being asked that question. You believe that there's something special about adopting a role which you don't like to talk about. Is that true? Right. He says, I don't like to talk about it. No, he says, because the moment you start describing it or getting under the skin of the character and spilling all the beans, you've lost the magic. Acting is all about suspending disbelief.
Right.
And inviting people into a sort of Alice in Wonderland world where, in a sense, anything is possible. So if you then try and, dissect and explain everything that you're trying to do in the role, you've destroyed that sort of bubble. So and I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
Not everyone agrees with that, but that was Dad's view. And,
We ought to have a little look at just a little bit of Doctor Who. So we'll show two clips. First is the regeneration from Bill Hartnell into Patrick Troughton, first Doctor to second Doctor, and then somebody online has put together kind of a trailer for the second Doctor era, which strings together quite a few bits. So that'll just give us a bit of a flavour for it. So can we run those, please? Technology at the time.
That's pretty good for 1966. Come on.
You may have changed your appearance, but I know who you are.
It is the Doctor, I know it is.
It's not only his face that's changed, he doesn't even act like him.
He looks like a normal being.
More intelligent than most.
Here we go again.
I wonder what it'll be this time.
Yes, I wonder. There are some corners of the universe which have read the most terrible things. Things which act against everything that we believe in. They must be fought. I think we're dealing with people who are not from this planet.
Well, that hardly answers my question. What did you say?
While you have been content merely to observe the evil in the galaxy, I have been fighting against it.
Where are we?
With the Tardis. It's my home.
Sad, really, isn't it? People spend all their time making nice things, and other people come along and break them.
Thank you, Doctor, for being so cooperative.
You know our ways. You must be destroyed.
Yes, well, I was afraid you'd get back to that.
We are not ready yet to teach these human beings the law of the Daleks.
Oh, my word! lives are different to anybody else's. That's the exciting thing. Nobody in the universe can do what we're doing.
And now I'm going to kill you.
When the Time Lords get him, you'll wish you had killed him.
Nothing in the world can stop me now! Stop!
You must be destroyed.
You'll need to be angry if you kill me. I'm a genius.
If we move outside the Tardis, we step into a dimension about which we know nothing.
Logic, my dear Zoe, merely enables one to be wrong with authority.
He brought something very distinctive to the role compared to Bill Hartnell, didn't he? He changed it so much. How do you think he defined the role of the Doctor for everybody who came after him?
That's a good one. Yeah, I mean, he actually wanted to play it as a black-skinned pirate, and the producer looked at him and thought, no. So yeah, that fell by the wayside, that bright idea. So yeah, I think he wanted to poke fun at the Beatles, so the haircut was really just mocking John, Paul, George and Ringo. So the beatnik combed forward hairstyle. Charlie Chaplin, I guess, was a big influence.
Right.
And then the way that they all spoke, not just Dan, but everybody in those days had really sort of clipped pronunciation, didn't they? They were frightfully posh. You know. Even when you're being attacked by Martians, you know, sort of, we are going to be destroyed. You know. But that's how they spoke.
Right.
I mean, that was the bar was set by Olivier.
Yes.
In a sense, it gradually sort of changes over time, but that was a hangover from the theatre. And I think a lot of the way that they're acting is a little bit sort of declamatory. You know?
Yeah.
So I guess he may be sort of transitioning out of that into a more sort of natural, a more sort of modern style. But yeah, bringing lots of fun to it was typical. And then leaving after 3 years, also then, actually there's this, it's become a rule. It's called the Troughton rule. And the reason that Matt Smith left Doctor Who was because of the Troughton rule, which is you don't stay in a part for longer than 3 years. Wow. Otherwise you get typecast. There you go. Yeah. So I'm famous. I have a rule.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, so I think, but I mean, there have been so many Doctors since then. I guess each has sort of brought their own stamp and personality and made it very much their own.
So many of them look back to Patrick Troughton as the man who defined it.
Well, I don't know about. I mean, I know
Peter Davison said, and David Tennant. They both say he was the best.
Really? Oh, bless him. Matt Smith actually thought Dad was the best. I don't know about David and the other ones, but Peter. Oh, well, that's good, isn't it?
Yeah. What was he like as a father?
Great fun. So Dad, I only really sort of knew him until I was about 16.
Right.
Because Dad left home when I was 16. We kept on seeing him. We kept on sort of meeting up once a week, but pretty much that was it. So, but for those 16 years, great fun. Loved culture, loved classical music. Though apart from recorder, he didn't play an instrument.
Is it true you're responsible for the recorder?
Apparently so, yes. So he thought a musical instrument would bring a little, added extra to the part. And me and my brother Peter were learning recorder at the time. And he thought, that'd be easy to carry around, better than a harp or something. But I don't play the recorder. Can you teach me recorder? So I just taught him a few tunes.
Right.
And the rest he sort of improvised.
Yeah.
Apart from that, what did he leave? He loved France, so we'd spend camping holidays, summer holidays, touring around France camping, which sounds very glamorous, but this was pre-Eurocamp and all these sort of glam camping things. It was literally a tent in a field, proper camping. That was great fun. That's where I developed my love of languages.
Right.
French.
And you went on to be a language teacher?
Yeah, I went on to do languages at university in Exeter and then teach, And only latterly sort of retrained to go into church ministry.
Right.
More about that later.
Yeah.
Dad's now known for living a double life. And this became apparent, more apparent to me than it was when I was 14, 15, 16, through my half-brother Michael's biography of Dad. Yeah. And that came out in 2012, and very kindly he sent me a copy. And I got halfway through it and I couldn't read on because there was just so much stuff in there which was just deeply upsetting. So Dad was, turns out that Dad was actually keeping two families going simultaneously, bigamously. So he was husband to Margaret and had a daughter and two sons by Margaret. So this is Michael, Dave and Joanna. And then left Margaret, had me, my brother Peter, and my sister Jane by Mum. And then left Mum when I was 16. And that gives you a pretty good idea of the state of his morals. I mean, acting isn't renowned for being the most moral sort of environment because it's all about breaking boundaries and that can easily sort of, come into real life. And in Dad's case, it came into his real life big time. And it was upsetting reading the book because, people were being mentioned who I knew. So he'd invited people back, for drinks, parties, for sort of after a film or after a show, that people come back and have nibbles and something to drink. And you bump into Fraser Hines and Annika Wills and Ben, and you get to know them sort of. They'd be around, weekends and stuff. And so it went on. And then you meet people at the TV studios that Dad would stop and chat with. And reading these people's names, of course, I recognise. Oh, right, I remember her. And then, oh no, he was having an affair with her. And then you get to the next chapter, and I remember when he was doing that radio. Oh no, he wasn't having an affair with her as well, was he? You're thinking, what, was there no end to this man's, deceit? So yeah, that was painful, as you can imagine. And I haven't yet finished reading the book because it was just too difficult. But as I say, so Dad left Mum for another woman when I was 16, but we carried on meeting each other for coffee in Richmond, West London, where I grew up. And, it was hard not having Dad at home. But, and it only got harder when I told him that I became a Christian. But you may want to save that for later.
Yeah, we'll come back to that in a minute. How old were you when you first became aware of the other family?
Well, Dad would be out early to go on location to, quarries in Dorset and hills in Wales and stuff. And would often be home really, really late, past our bedtime. And there were times when, say, he was filming in Acton Studios or Teddington Studios or up at the Beeb at White Lane. And it would still be a long day's filming and he'd be back late. And it was only on reading the book that I realised the reason he was coming home late wasn't always because he was busy at work. He was actually commuting to Mill Hill, where Margaret lived, and spending time with her, and then coming home to us and keeping up the pretense that he was working. So you're thinking, oh my word. Yeah, so very much a double life.
What happened at Christmas?
Christmas was always with us.
Right.
And then occasionally we would meet up with, say, David. Once David and Michael had left home, Joanna remained at home with Margaret. But once David had married and Michael had married, then we'd meet up with them more than we used to. And now I'm beginning to realise that was because they were living at home and Margaret would have been there. I remember meeting Margaret a couple of times, but these were like sort of few and far between.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's weird. Okay, it's all in hindsight. You think, gosh, that must have been exhausting, you know, trying to keep up the pretense, let alone everything else.
And I suppose as a child, even as a teenager, you weren't aware of any press that was talking about your father would refer to David and Michael and Joanna
as previous family.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because were you and your siblings even mentioned in those news reports? I mean, which was the official family?
I think we were classed as official family because when we were taken up to the studios,
I see. Of
course,
we
were introduced as Mark and Peter and Jane, and this is, these are Bunny's children. Bunny was my mum's nickname.
Right.
I guess we were the official family. No, Dad. The whole point of the secret life is that you keep the secret one secret, and Dad hated journalism, journalists and publicity, and you're now beginning to realise, I realise why, because he didn't want all these skeletons to come out of the closet.
In Michael's biography of your father, he says that at the beginning of his relationship with your mother, he went to a vicar in Mill Hill to ask advice or whatever, and wasn't very impressed to be told on no account should he go ahead with this. Why do you think he did that? Have you ever reflected on that? Yeah,
I think it's because because of the influence of his mum, so Dad's mum. That's why he never told her about having left Margaret.
Right. So you never met your grandma on
that side.
Wow.
Because he didn't want her to find out, because he thought it would probably finish her off.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite something to live with.
To live with.
Yeah. But you weren't that aware as a child. It was more later on. So
no, I mean, so I'm the youngest of three, Jane, Peter, Mark. So I don't know what Mum told Jane, if anything. Mm-hmm. Mum certainly knew about it. I mean, how do you keep that sort of thing, secret from your own wife?
Yeah.
And gave him an ultimatum.
Right.
Which was, it's either me or Margaret, decide.
Right.
And he decided to stay with us, which was why I, regarded Dan as Dad.
Yeah, right.
Wasn't aware of anything else that was going on until, 5 years ago. Which is probably just as well. So I think I'm thankful to the Lord for not having revealed that to me earlier, because that, it's hard enough as an older man, let alone as a teen.
Yeah. What was it like navigating having a famous father generally? Especially when it was on television.
Yeah, I never knew anything different in one sense. So it was like, this is normal.
Right.
So going swimming at Richmond Baths was pretty much out of bounds for him, because where do you keep a pen and a notebook to sign autographs in swimming trunks? So and he was, if he was on holiday, he would never give an autograph. So when he was on holiday, he basically said, I'm on holiday. I'm sorry, I don't do autographs when I'm on holiday.
Right.
Other times he was very, very good. The fan mail was just gargantuan. Ridiculous quantities of paper coming through the door every day.
Right.
Or the postman just knocking and saying, these are for your dad. And then he was very, very diligent about answering letters, fan letters. He would write back and, thinking, wow. So heavy industry, frankly. School was, everyone knew who he was. teachers and pupils, obviously, and, you know, I'd be walking down the corridor at school and you'd hear, exterminate, exterminate, exterminate. And it was normally a teacher doing it, not a pupil. Sad but true. Yeah, so that was, but where I went to school in West London, there were quite a few actors' sons at the school.
Right.
I mean, probably not nationally as well known as Dad at that time in the 60s, but nevertheless, you know, people who were known, who were in, you know, the Sweeney and Z Cars and that sort of stuff. So it wasn't like, ooh, my word, we got an actor's son in the school.
Right, okay.
It was, you know, so in a sense it wasn't that unusual. It was fun, yeah, being able to, you know, people to say, oh gosh, what was it like going to the studios? So I guess all of that side was fun. I remember being on holiday, we're going to France, we're on the ferry, and Dad is doing the usual trick of saying, I don't sign autographs. And then a sailor comes down, comes up to Dad, to one of the crew, and says, nice to have you on board, Mr. Troughton. Would you like to come up to the bridge? And I thought, get in, you know. So we were.
And he said, no, I'm on holiday.
Yeah, no, he didn't. No, because he was in the Navy. So I thought, oh, great, fabulous,
Of
you know,
course, yeah.
bring back memories. It's funny, you know. It was. I mean, I remember the thing was yawing and heaving, you know, typical cross-channel ferry. Didn't have stabilizers. Oh, please. So you know, it was rough. And I said to Dad, Dad, is this rough? And he said, calm as a mill pond. I thought, yikes, what's a rough sea like? You know. Anyway, there we are, trooping up to the bridge, and that was great. You know, I mean, not many of us can sort of say,
Yeah.
I've steered a ferry or whatever.
Is it true he went out in disguise sometimes?
Yes, he did. So he had a sheikh's turban, a false beard, and moustache, because he looks quite, you know, he looks quite Middle Eastern with the right light.
Right.
You know. And yeah, so he would go out disguised.
Wow.
Because you can't do anything. You can't shop. You can't go anywhere. You're just being.
But there's not many sheikhs in Kew. Or they weren't there.
They weren't there. No. Now, oh, everywhere. No, no, they weren't. That's true. But yeah, you've probably got more noticed actually.
Yes. Oh, look, it's Patrick Troughton again.
Tourists,
Trying not to be noticed. Yes, that's right. Now, you became a Christian at some point, which was not part of your upbringing
Not
at
part
all.
of the plan, no.
So tell us what happened.
Well, I went to a sort of nominally Christian primary school, and then we had religious assembly at Latimer, you know, twice a week. So nominally Christian, but that was about it. It was only, you know, sort of a varnish. And yeah, I was, I guess, like my dad. Dad was a sort of mystic type, so he didn't not believe in God, but for him, God was just some sort of mysterious other, you know, some life force, you know, I guess sort of shades of Doctor who was basically unknowable and tolerant. If he knows everything, then he'll understand, basically, I guess was his sort of bottom line, which in his case was probably just as well. But I never doubted the existence of God as a young man. I remember Nicky Horn was doing Capital Radio in the 1970s in London, and there was a quiz show, and one of the questions he asked the contestant was, so what's your greatest ambition in life? And that got me thinking, and I thought, ooh, what's my greatest ambition in life? I know. I want to know who God is.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that a strange thought?
Yeah. And how old were you then?
18.
Right. Wow.
So not religious, not churchy, nothing like that.
Yeah.
So just school, all I heard. Hymns, you know, scripture readings a couple of times a week. I want to know who God is. And then I left school. I'm at university in Exeter. I'm over in France teaching English as part of the course. And I come back for half term, and I get a phone call from an old pal, David, who I knew was a Christian at school. He was nice bloke and lived locally in Kew. And he said, let's go for a drink. Let's catch up, old times, talk, write off some of the teachers we had and that sort of thing. So we met up in a pub on Kew Green, and I knew he was a born-againer, you see, one of these keen people, keen Christian. So I thought I'd throw a few hand grenades at him. So my best hand grenade was, why did God allow the devil to fall? Okay? And I thought that was a good question. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty good question, isn't it? In other words, God is all-powerful, okay? There's evil in the world, duh. Why does God allow evil? So why did God allow the devil to fall in the first place? What's the reason for suffering? And do you know what he answered? He said, I don't know. And it just continued like that. I thought, you don't know much, really, do you? And you can't answer my questions, can you? And by the end of the evening, he said, and this was the thing that he left with me, he said, Mark, I can't answer your questions, but you've got to find out who Jesus Christ is. Uh-huh. And that was that. And we said ta-ra until next time. I went home, and a day or two after that, I remember thinking the thought, and I said it out loud. It's really weird. I said, all right, I'll read it then. And by it, I'm talking about the New Testament, that in modern English, J.B. Phillips, that we were given when we left primary school, and I still had it. Yeah. I had my Bible from secondary school, because when you joined secondary school in those days, you were given an atlas, a dictionary, and a Bible. Right. Of course you were, why not? So I took down my J.B. Phillips and I started reading the Gospel of Mark. I thought, why not? Good place to start. And I'm reading about this bloke Jesus. And I'm coming face to face with this man who is very interesting. And by the time I get to chapter 7, there's a debate going on about foods, and the Pharisees are tut-tutting at the disciples because they're eating without having washed their hands, so their hands are unclean, ceremonially unclean. They're defiled as they eat, and they're tut-tutting, and they're thinking, this is not right. What does your rabbi, this Jesus chap, what does he have to say about that? And Jesus goes on to explain that it's not what goes into your stomach that makes you unclean. It's what comes out of your heart. That's what makes a person unclean. And then he lists, in verse 23 or so, he lists all the things that make a person unclean. And he pins me to the wall. So it's things like lust and adultery and sexual immorality and thieving and slander and malice and being nasty to people. That's what makes you unclean. Bang! And I'm thinking, whoa, I'm unclean. Wow. I know I'm unclean. I'm guilty. Right. So I came under what we call the conviction of sin. Jesus has just told me, like he's eyeballed me, and he said, Mark, you're unclean. So I didn't stop. I kept on reading. I thought, I need to read more. Is there anything more I need to know? So I kept on reading. I read through, I get to Romans, Paul's letter to the Romans, and I'm reading Romans. And Paul is just basically unpacking the reason why Jesus came. And I get to chapter 3 and verse 21. And he's just been saying, the non-Jews are unclean. Yes. And then he says, the Jews are also unclean. Okay? And then in 3:21 he says, but now a righteousness from God has been made known, to which the law and the prophets testify. A righteousness from God that is by faith in Jesus Christ. God presented him as a sacrifice of atonement by faith in his blood. And it's like penny drops. I'm thinking, That's why Jesus died on the cross. He's taking my punishment. It's a sacrifice of atonement because I'm unclean, and he's doing something for me that I can't do for myself, and that's make myself clean, righteous in God's sight. Why has nobody ever told me this before? And my second thought was, God is so good. That's amazing. God is so good that he should send Jesus, and that Jesus should be willing to die on the cross to deal with my uncleanness. Wow! As I go to my brother, who's watching Match of the Day in the sitting room, and I say to him, Pete, have you read this? Do you know about this Christian stuff? And he said, no, not interested. And I thought, wow, I perhaps ought to go to church or something.
Right.
You know, so I knew that David was going to some Baptist church over the railway line, which was literally a stone's throw from our house. So I thought, I know what, I'll go to church. So I started going to the local church, and the sermons, you know, a bit complicated, a bit sort of over my head. The thing used to actually reduce me to tears were the hymns. So reading from grace hymns, you know, my song is love unknown, my Saviour's love to me, love to the loveless shown that they might lovely be. I'm thinking, yes, I understand that. That's what I've been reading in the Bible.
Right. And
all these hymns are talking about God's free love for the unclean. I'm thinking, this is Christianity. You know, this is amazing.
Wow.
And so this is a pastor of a Baptist church. It's a few months later, I'm back from France, and I go up to Robin Dowling, and I say, I've read somewhere in the Bible, I think it's Acts 8, that when you become a Christian, you need to be baptized. You think I need to be baptized? I'm asking that question of a Baptist pastor. and he says, I thought this was amazing self-restraint looking back. He said, I think that might be a good idea. He's probably going, yes! You know. So I'm baptized in August of that year. And I'm so naive. I mean, I have this sort of like innocence, you know. And I'm thinking, well, perhaps I ought to go to Bible college there. You know, and just learn more about this Christian thing, because it's just the best thing I've ever discovered.
So did you?
No, I couldn't afford it. So I rang up the local education authority and I said, you know, would you give me a grant to go to Bristol, Trinity College, Bristol, Jim Packer, Alec Mattia, you know, household names. And they said, no, you've had 4 years of modern language degree, we're not giving you any more. So that was that.
Right.
And Dad was up to his neck in divorce alimony payments, and he wouldn't have wanted to fund me going to Bible college.
What was his response when you said to him?
Yeah, that Saturday, we met up in Richmond for coffee. And I knew I'd had to tell him, because you can't really hide that sort of thing. And I told Mum, because her dad had been a vicar.
Oh, really?
And her immediate reaction, she's really, really good with the reactions, my mum. Her immediate reaction was, oh, you'll be as poor as church mice. She's right. We are as poor as church mice. But no, I thought, I've got to tell Dad. So there we are, drinking our coffee. And I said, Dad, I've got something to tell you. I've become a Christian. And he looked at me and he said, oh, surely you don't believe in all of that Adam and Eve stuff, do you? I thought, oof, ouch. And I said, well, actually, yes, I do. And I think that was pretty much the end of the conversation. But it was like a glazier had just walked into the room and stuck a pane of glass between me and Dad. You know, I could hear him, I could see him, but it was like ding, 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 ding. I couldn't touch him. Have you had that experience where you feel as though it's like a chasm has opened up? It's like you're on a different planet. And I think now I understand what it is. I mean, God opened my eyes to see my own sin. He opened my eyes to see who Jesus is and why he died on the cross. And Dad was still blind. He couldn't see it.
Did you ever talk about it again? Or
No, I can't remember sort of distinct conversations. But no, come 1987, he's over in the States doing a Doctor Who convention. He sits up at the end of the bed, has a heart attack, dies. And I'm with Mum in Kew. The phone goes, and it's Morris, the agent. And he says, Patrick's dead. And Mum, I mean, she went through the Second World War, you know, as did Dad. She was a Wren. And that sort of gives you a certain amount of backbone and, you know, toughness, doesn't it? And she puts the phone down. And not one to beat about the bush. Mum says, Dad's dead. Bang, just like that, you know. I'm going to give it to you straight. Dad's dead. And I was like, oof. But, I mean, sufficient amount of time had elapsed between 87 and last time, he left home in 76.
Right.
For me to, in a sense, of, you know, grown distant to some extent.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll leave Dad's eternity in God's hands.
Mark, thank you very much. That's been
pleasure.
really super to chat to you and to hear some of those experiences. And to hear particularly about your own encountering Jesus. That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening. Yeah.
We'll take a break now for 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll just have about 10 minutes just to finish off results of the quiz, and then I'll just say a few things to round off our evening. And Leela and Mike are going to play a little bit more for us now.
There's no great love. Hang on. Everyone's already talking loud. There we go.
There is no greater love than that which God has shown by sending his own Son, who chose to leave his throne. He went up to the cross. He died for you and me, that we would be with him and share in eternity. What God is this? How glorious is he, who reigns in heaven forever. What perfect love, what sacrifice. Jesus gave himself for me. Yes, Jesus gave himself for me. There is no other path that leads us to our home, that brings us to our King, to stand before his throne. And one day we'll arrive, and there will be no doubt that Jesus Christ is Lord. And then every knee will bow. What God is this? How glorious is he, who reigns in heaven forever. What perfect love, what sacrifice. Jesus Jesus Christ the risen one. What God is this? How glorious is He who reigns in forever to love. What sacrifice Jesus gave Himself for me. Yes, Jesus gave Himself for me. What God is this? How glorious is He who reigns in heaven forever. What perfect love, what sacrifice Jesus gave Himself for me. Yes, Jesus gave Himself for me. Here we are, all as one, lifting high the mighty Son. As we sing to You, our God, we lift it up. As we've come before Your throne, let the joy of heaven flow. We were made to worship You and You alone. Join the song that magnifies Your name. Holy people shouting out Your praise. We lift our hands and give You all the glory, so the world will see that Jesus is alive. He's alive. When we sing, for the Lord is good, we shout, for His love endures. We won't stay silent, Lord. We go wherever You will go. We live that the world would know. We won't stay silent, Lord. Let Your praise fill the skies. You have opened up our eyes, and we long for this world to know Your name. We worship You, the Lord our God. Set our eyes on things above. Your church is here, Lord, armed with love. Have Your way. Join the song that magnifies Your name.
Hi, this is not quite the advertised 15 minutes, but it is warm in here, so rather than sit around for too long chatting, we'll try and bring the evening towards a close. So Simeon is going to come and go through the results of the quiz. Can we trust you to mark your own honestly, or do you have to swap with somebody else?
Bro. We'll go through these questions. Hopefully, we can do it relatively speedily. So, number one, what does Tardis stand for? That's time and relative dimension in space. You can have the plural of dimensions if you want. There's a bit of ambiguity there. Number two, in the fiction of the TV show, who created the Daleks? That's Davros. And for the bonus points, who created the Daleks of the TV series? That's Terry Nation. Number three, on what date was the first episode of Doctor Who originally broadcast? And that was the 23rd of November, 1963, the day after JFK was assassinated. Number four, which actor played the Doctor for the most number of seasons? That's Tom Baker. He was Doctor Who for 7 seasons. What was the name of the Doctor's bright yellow car, famously driven around by John Pertwee? That's Bessie. Number 6, which famous singer appeared alongside David Tennant in 2007's Christmas special as Astrid Peth? That's Kylie Minogue. Number 7, name the writer who brought back Doctor Who in 2005. That's Russell T Davies. Number 8, in which episode did the Weeping Angels first appear? That's Blink. Number 9, which recurring character first appeared in 2008's Silence in the Library? Riversong. Number 10, which companion who first appeared alongside John Pertwee's Doctor returned to the show in 2006 and then received their own spin-off? That's Sarah Jane Smith, who is played by Elizabeth Sladen. So Christmas Day just gone, Jodie Whittaker became the new Doctor, but in 1999 there was a comic relief special, The Curse of Fatal Death, in which at the end the Doctor regenerated into Joanna Lumley. Number 12, which character who first appeared alongside Patrick Troughton in The Web of Fear would go on to be a series regular with John Pertwee? That is the Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. You can also have Colonel Lethbridge Stewart, Alistair Gordon, or any variation. There you go. Number 13. After he left the series in 1969, Patrick Troughton returned 3 times to the show. And so you get a point for each of these. That's in the 3 Doctors, the 5 Doctors, and the 2 Doctors. Number 14, which member of the League of Gentlemen played Patrick Troughton in the documentary drama An Adventure in Space and Time? And that's Rhys Shearsmith. Number 15, Patrick Troughton's Doctor would frequently play which instrument? Well, if you are listening, the recorder. Number 16, give the names of the first names of all 5 of the second Doctor's companions. So that is Polly and Ben and Jamie and Victoria and Zoe. So 2 of Patrick Troughton's sons also appeared in Doctor Who. I think both of them were named earlier. That's David and Michael. Yep, I have this one. 2007's Gridlock saw the return of which monster? And that was the Macra. Sadly, many episodes of Doctor Who are currently missing from the archive. How many of Patrick Troughton's are missing? There are 53 missing, sadly. And in the 2nd and 3rd episodes of The Mind Robber, this one's really obscure, Jamie was played by someone different. And the reason was because Fraser Hines had got chickenpox. And so Hamish Wilson stepped in. So there we go. If there's any you need repeated, quickly shout, but otherwise tally up and we'll see if we can find a winner. Number 12. Oh, hang on. No, number 12, what's that? Bonus point. Sorry, I missed that. That was Kate Lethbridge Stewart. Cool. And was there any others that need repeating? Or are you good to toast up scores and we'll see if we can find a winner? Cool, I'll give you a moment just to add those up. is it 30? 30 should be the maximum number of points. So yeah, that should include the bonus points. So you get, so for each one where there's a multiple answer, there's a point for each that was said, yeah. So bonus points with, yeah, number 2, and yeah. I can go through them. Okay, so did anyone get 15? 15? Anyone? Anyone as much as that? Maybe I'm being a bit ambitious. Maybe this is really... 15, put your hands up nice and clear so I can see 15. Anyone over 20? Oh, we've got 2. Oh, very good. Okay, anyone over 25? Still a hand up there. Is it just you 2? Did you do it together? Did it separately? Okay. 27? Oh, 28? 29? 30? Oh. There you go. I'll come and bring up your prize.
Thank you very much, Simeon. Simeon came back early from a Doctor Who convention today to be here tonight, so appreciate that very much. One of the reasons that Doctor Who and science fiction generally appeals to us is, well, partly it's the variety, it's the creativity, but also it's because science fiction has always done very well at dealing with some of the... Doctor Who has done this at its best several times. It's been able to deal with really deep emotional issues, and there have been some profoundly moving Doctor Who episodes over the years. Some utterly terrifying ones, some laughable ones, but some have a real profound connection with us because of the kinds of emotional responses that it generates. There's something profoundly true about it at its best. Not because there's something true about Daleks or Cybermen or whatever, but in terms of the way that people relate and deal with these monsters. Think about in The Doctor Dances, when the Doctor says, "Just this once, everybody lives." What a great moment that is. Or the wonder of Amy and Rory's love as they age into an old couple, having stayed with each other for so long, and after Rory had guarded her for thousands of years. Or the Doctor's loss of some of the companions along the way. These are profoundly moving moments. But one of the things science fiction does is it presents alternative worlds, and it enables us to get a different perspective on our own reality. It's a theory that goes under the very grand name of cognitive estrangement by a Croatian philosopher called Darko Suvin, who sounds like he's one of the baddies from Doctor Who. And he says that science fiction enables us to think about our world in different ways because it removes our assumptions about the normal life, and so we look at things differently. And so Doctor Who, populated, of course, by monsters and enemies of various sorts. And they give expression, they're a metaphor for many of the fears that we struggle with. The Daleks, inspired firstly by the Nazis, they're fascists, they want everybody to be like them. And then in later versions of the Daleks, they become religious extremists. And they don't tolerate difference. Nobody can be any different from them. Everything must be either Dalek or destroyed. The Cybermen, with their representation of the fear of technology going mad and humanity being lost, as transhumanism, as the whole approach to making human beings increasingly genetically modified and technologically modified. If that goes mad, if that becomes unrestrained, where will it take us? What kind of monsters will we produce? Or the cloning of Sontarans. There's the fear of separation. There's the fear of environmental disaster. There's the fear of the world biting us back because of the things that we've done. Think about the Silurians or the Sea Devils. There's the fear of death, of course. So many fears that a series like this has given expression to over time. And against these enemies, the Doctor is a hero and a savior. He and his companions, as well as some of the others that he meets along the way, they serve a comparable function, a contrasting function, not giving rise to our fears, but helping us to reflect on what really matters to us, on some of the really important stuff within life. At his best, the Doctor is wise and principled. He's kind, he's concerned for the vulnerable, he's powerful, he's a force for justice, he's self-sacrificing. At his best. But of course, the Doctor is also very flawed. He can be arrogant. He's fallible. He can be ruthless, vindictive. He can be uncommitted. He's often not prepared to face the consequences of the things that he does. And the Doctor carries a big burden of guilt, and that's become a very major part of some of the storylines since the reboot in 2005. A load of guilt because of things that he's done. He eventually needs to be imprisoned in the Pandorica, all of his enemies coming together against him because he is such a terrible force. So the Doctor is great, but the Doctor is also very flawed, and he needs to be saved from himself. And his companions bring something of that to him. They give him the true community that he longs for. They show him love and forgiveness and grace. And they hold him to account. So we have these fictional enemies that are representing some very real fears for us. And we have a fictional hero who expresses some of the good things about humanity. But those good things are not enough, because although the Doctor is not human, he looks human, or she looks human. We need to start saying now with Jodie Whittaker as the 13th Doctor. The Doctor looks human. And the Doctor isn't one of us, but is one of us, and is in many ways representing the best and the worst of humanity. But the Doctor's biggest flaw is that he's fictional. So we have these real, very, very real fears within life. In particular, about our own guilt. We don't carry the kind of guilt that the Doctor bears, but we may not be the moral monsters of the Daleks. But we all know that we're moral failures. Mark was saying earlier about reading Mark chapter 7, and what comes out of a person's heart is what makes him or her unclean. All sorts of things that we know are rooted deep within us that actually we need to be rescued from. And is there a real-life rescuer who can deal with those kinds of things and who can deal with these very non-real fears? The Bible says that there is. And that's our conviction here as a church, as Christians. We believe that there is a real-life superhero, a real-life savior, Jesus Christ. There have been many people who have explored parallels between the Doctor and Jesus over time. Sylvester McCoy was one who said, I don't mean to be sacrilegious, but there's an interesting comparison to be made. The Doctor is something of a God-man kind of character, in that he's so powerful and almost timeless. But of course, the Doctor is very flawed. The difference is that Jesus is a real historical character. But he's not just a historical character. He's a real man, but actually the Bible's claim is that he is also God stepping into our world in human form. He is fully God and fully human. And if that sounds like a paradox that you can't get your head around, it's no harder than the wave-particle duality in physics and a number of other things within the world of science. One of the, I think it's Tim Latimer in Family of Blood talks about the Doctor as being someone who can see the turn of the universe, who's at the center of time and who is wonderful. And Jesus really is that person who is at the center of time and can see the turn of the universe and is wonderful. Let me read you a little bit from a letter written by one of the early Christians, the Apostle Paul, to the church in Colossae. He says, the Son, that is Jesus, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior. But now he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death, to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation, if you continue in your faith, established and firm, and do not move from the hope held out in the gospel. Once you were alienated from God, says Paul, we were the enemies. We are God's enemies. We are the monsters in the universe. We're the ones who've rebelled against the creator of the universe, and who have all of this uncleanness coming out of our hearts. We've all messed up. We've all failed. We don't meet our own standards, never mind the standards of a holy God. And yet this holy God loves us so much that his son Jesus comes into our world to die for us, to die the death that we deserve, so that we can be cleaned from that uncleanness, so that we can be put right with God, so that we can be rescued. So rescued from our guilt, rescued from our fear of death. That is amazing good news. If that's completely new to you, I urge you to do what Mark did and do some reading. When he first became persuaded by his friend David that he needed to read the New Testament to find out who Jesus was, go and do the same. Find out who Jesus was. Find out about this man who died and apparently, according to the records, rose again from death. Find out about that. Don't just park it on one side and pretend it doesn't matter. Because this is the very center point of history. And the story of what Jesus did, the true story of what Jesus did, is a far more exciting story than even the best Doctor Who stories. Find out. Take one of these booklets as you leave. Why Jesus? Come and talk to Mark or myself, or other people wearing lanyards would be happy to chat to you, I'm sure, or somebody that you came with. But follow up. Don't just leave this. Take this further. Do some reading. Read this. Read the New Testament. We've got an alpha course running in the autumn. You can sign up on the response cards that are on your table. So you can put your name and details on there. You've got to tick the GDPR box, otherwise we won't be able to put your details in the computer to email you. So you've got to tick the box, but it's only in order to contact you about the Alpha course. If you're interested in getting together with some people to talk this through, then you can do that. Can I pray for us very briefly as we close? Father God, thank you that you are God, you are the creator of the universe, and that you love us even though we are your enemies. Thank you that Jesus came to rescue us, and we pray, please help us to understand Jesus more. Help us to know who he is, why he came, and how he saves us. Amen. Thank you very much for coming. Do come and chat to Mark some more. I'm sure he's happy to chat to you. Thank you to Leela and to Mike for playing for us. Brilliant. Thank you.
So, what's the speed we're thinking? That bit slow, is that right? Okay.
Sometimes I go out by myself